Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
We're in our nation's capital to update you on the work of NCBA in Washington, D.C. We'll have special guests from Congress, plus insights on the key policies and regulations that could impact the beef industry.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. We're coming to you from NCBA's Washington, D.C. office, located just a short distance from both Capitol Hill and the White House. We're here to celebrate National Ag Day, a day when we say thank you to the farmers and ranchers that provide food, feed, and fiber for the world while preserving and protecting the resources in their care. Today, we're going to talk to NCBA's DC staff to get their thoughts on a wide range of important policy issues and also learn how they share the message in Washington that U.S. beef production is both efficient and sustainable. And joining me now is Ethan Lane, Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Ethan, what does Ag Day look like here in our nation's capital?
Well, for us here in Washington, the real important job is to remind lawmakers from all over the country that may not have agriculture in their district that a small handful of dedicated families around the country ensure that every time you walk to the refrigerator and open it, it's full of food. And every time you go to the diner, there's a hamburger waiting for you. And it's a really important opportunity to not just remind them of that, but remind them what we need to keep doing that day after day. Drought, hurricanes, rain, heat, cold, all of the different forces that our producers overcome to put that food on a table every day really comes down to their tenacity and a little help from Washington to both stay out of the way and be there in those few times that we do need them.
You know, we hear a lot from this administration about the environment, and I'm curious, how have conversations changed with the Biden administration as it relates to both the environment and the beef cattle industry?
So I think we've come a long way from the bad old days of cattle grazing and cattle production being a villain in the climate story. You know, and some of that is our own industry. I think getting a little more comfortable talking about what a good job we do, not being afraid of that conversation. But there's also a much better understanding in the scientific community and the research community about just how essential cattle production is, what grazing does for the environment, what you give up. If we're not out there every day managing those resources and using those grasslands the way that they were intended to be used. So that different evolving understanding is leading to better policy decisions, a conversation here in Washington that's more focused on voluntary incentive-based climate action rather than the force of regulation or, at the point of a gun, which is not what we want in that kind of deal. We want our producers to want to be engaged in that. We want them to make more money. We want them to do better. We want their environment to be more vigorous. And we do that through incentivizing change, not forcing it.
You talk about conversations. You have a wonderful staff here in Washington, D.C. Tell us about some of the things you do to educate both the White House and lawmakers about the sustainability of the beef industry.
Sure. It's one of those things where, you got to lay that groundwork early. You have to build those relationships and you have to build trust with lawmakers and folks in the administration, career officials at USDA or the Department of Interior. They need to know year over year that this office and the experts that represent the cattle industry are a wealth of information on any given day on topics throughout the federal government, so that when those big ticket issues come up, we're ready to go in and help them understand how we might be impacted by, say, an issue that maybe on first glance doesn't have an impact on the cattle industry. When you talk about taxes for the Build Back Better plan that was being contemplated last year, you don't typically immediately think about agriculture until you see how they were intending to pay for it. And then all of a sudden, it's really important for our team to get up on Capitol Hill and help lawmakers understand exactly why we're able to build these operations that are big enough to feed the world and how we hold on to them generation over generation.
You talk about building relationships with lawmakers. Let's talk about the kinds of things you all do to build relationships both with lawmakers and also regulators. Those are two really different audiences here in D.C., but you work in building relationships with both, don't you?
We do. It's essential because, Congress passes the laws and then the executive branch implements them. And a lot of times those are career government officials that have been here 20, 30, 40 years. And it's amazing when you get to know them how much they know about these different areas. I mean, they've dedicated their lives and sometimes to one hallway at USDA. So, it's really important for us to make sure that we've got both sides of that equation. So whether it's, implementing farm bill programs and making sure that we're getting disaster assistance out where it needs to go, or talking about producer education for risk management programs, any of those things, it really takes that hand in glove between the intent of Congress and then the actual practical application of that intent when it comes over to the executive branch side.
We always talk about the benefit of having actual boots on the ground here in Washington, D.C. In a post-pandemic world where we spend a lot of time on Zoom calls and telephone calls and so forth, can you point to any specific examples where having actual boots on the ground and being resident here in D.C. has made a substantial difference?
Every single day since the pandemic began, this office has had the lights on and lobbyists hard at work, making sure that the cattle industry's views are represented here in Washington. And every single day since the pandemic began, that's been important. We've had face-to-face interactions. We've hosted meetings on the rooftop when we weren't able to inside. We've been up on Capitol Hill. We've had coffee meetings. We've gone on walks, outside with members of Congress when we couldn't be in a building with them. We've had those opportunities to have an ongoing dialogue rather than scheduling a Zoom call. And anyone who's been working remotely for the last couple years knows that as convenient as that has been, the hallway conversation and that just sort of passing interaction that only happens when you're in one place together for a long period of time really is lost. And that's true in Washington too. It's a really big city, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty small town.
Thank you so much for joining us on this show.
You bet. Welcome to Washington.
Thank you. Now, a great way you can support NCBA's work in Washington, D.C., defending and advocating for the cattle industry, is to become a member. It's easy to do. Just call toll-free 1-866-233-3872, or you can visit the website ncba.org. NCBA's efforts in Washington, D.C. help protect the business climate for cattlemen and women all across the country. And joining me now is Robert Bonney. He's USDA's Undersecretary of Agriculture for Farm Production and Conservation. Mr. Undersecretary, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cattle producers all across the country are keeping a close eye on the Biden administration's 30 by 30 or America the Beautiful plan. And I guess the question many of us have is, how does USDA intend to account for some of the great conservation work we're already doing on our operations?
Yeah, the short answer is we're going to try and build on that. Okay. There's a lot of good conservation that's been going on out in the field for a long time. Typically, it's incentive-based, it's collaborative, and that's the type of approach we're going to try and emphasize in the America the Beautiful effort. Right now, we're talking to some folks in the West about how do we protect wildlife habitat while protecting working ranches. And in so many cases, whether it's ranching, farmland, forest land, we've got to keep those working lands working in order to accomplish our conservation goals. So, we want this to be an effort that's about collaboration. We want it to be one where we, at the end of the day, we accomplish some conservation goals, but part of that is having producers and ranchers and landowners that are contributing, that are there because they want to be there, because it helps their operation. So, we understand there's some concern out in the countryside. We welcome the scrutiny, frankly, and look forward to working with folks.
Let's talk public lands. Obviously, you know that cattle producers are one of the largest stewards of millions of acres of public lands all across the United States. And I'm curious, what is the administration's philosophy on the role of grazing in conservation efforts?
Grazing is a critical tool. It's critical to maintain our working lands in and of itself, and obviously they need to be economically productive. But grazing can be an important management tool on many of our western lands, including our public lands. We have challenges with fire, for example, and grazing can play an important role there. And so again, we're looking for a collaborative approach. Again, understanding to accomplish our conservation goals, we're going to need to work hand in hand with ranchers in the West, whether they be on private working lands or public lands.
USDA has announced several investments in climate-smart agriculture. You probably recognize that many of us in the beef industry believe there's nothing more climate-smart than putting a cow out there on green grass and using that harvester, if you will, to turn it into viable protein for consumers. What's your view on the role of livestock agriculture as it relates to your climate-smart objectives?
Yeah, we're trying to build a suite of climate policies and programs that are voluntary. Okay. They're incentive-based, recognize the critical role of working lands in addressing the climate problem. If you look at agriculture in the U.S., it contributes about 10% of our U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions. That's lower than a lot of other countries, and the reason is because our agriculture is very efficient and very productive, and that's certainly true on the livestock side. The good news is there's a lot of alignment between high productivity agriculture and accomplishing our climate goals, whether it's grazing to improve soil health, the same thing on the cropland side, whether it's cover crops or nutrient management, what have you. We're going to try and take advantage of that alignment and I think create incentives that whereby producers can integrate climate smart practices into their operations. On the livestock side, there's enormous opportunities to both sequester carbon in the soil, yes, even while we reduce methane emissions. Mm-hmm. And I think our goal at USDA is to take advantage of that alignment, to work with producers, and to recognize that even as we accomplish our climate goals, we need to produce the food and fiber that society needs. And so productivity and keeping our producers profitable and productive is really important.
We believe that cow is a great American upcycler, and we want to take advantage of that, clearly. One last question for you. Obviously, the new discussion on a brand new farm bill is ensuing now. I'm curious, you mentioned incentives. What programs do you anticipate that might incentivize producers to implement more environmentally friendly and conservation, sustainably conservation practices?
Well, ranchers are already taken advantage of our conservation programs across the country, the livestock industry more broadly. I hope that we'll continue to be focused on that there are always tweaks, there are always improvements that we can make to those programs. Mm-hmm. We're excited, for example, about the Grassland CRP program. We think there are opportunities for folks in the livestock industry to take advantage of that, to keep working lands working, even as we accomplish wildlife, water quality, or other goals. And so that, we'll expect a robust conversation about how much money, what opportunities there in the Farm Bill. Another important area is going to be disaster programs, right, and how do we deal with drought? How do we help producers, whether it's thinking about, our crop insurance, the risk management side of the portfolio, disaster programs. I think that's going to be an important part of the conversation, and I think the livestock industry sits in the middle of that conversation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come visit with us. Hope you'll come back soon.
I'll come back. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Still ahead on this special Ag Day edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll have more on what's happening here in Washington, D.C. and how federal policies and regulations could affect your cattle business.
Cattle producers across the country work hard to care for their animals and their land. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is there to help. Find out how you can work with NRCS to develop a conservation plan for your operation. Find possible funding resources for implementing conservation practices, or get free expert advice on ways to improve your farm or ranch. Visit the website nrcs.usda.gov today.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, CEO of MyPillow. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried to cancel myself and MyPillow. During these times, your support has meant everything to us. So my employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. We're selling the best products ever for the best prices ever. For example, we have my towels with proprietary technology, which makes them soft and absorbent. Towels that work, what a concept. They're made with USA cotton and come in a variety of awesome colors. My 6-piece towel set is regularly $109.99, now just $39.99 with your promo code. So go to mypillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to receive this exclusive offer. If you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome back. America's cattle producers have worked for generations to protect the natural resources in their care. As a way to highlight this commitment, NCBA recently released a list of sustainability goals for the beef industry in the fall of 2021. Here to talk more about those goals and what they mean to beef producers is Mary Thomas Hart, Environmental Counsel for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Mary Thomas, thanks so much for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's step back a moment and talk just a little bit about how those goals we just discussed were actually developed in the first place.
Sure. So, I think that the development of the goals were just the continuation of a long history in the U.S. cattle industry of continuous improvement, right? For generations, cattle producers in the United States have worked really hard to make their operations more efficient, more profitable, and more environmentally sustainable. So when we brought together 17 producers from across the country to kind of sit down and talk about how we can build on that legacy of continuous improvement, these goals were the product of that. And we're really excited to be able to advocate on these 4 goals.
So let's talk about those 4 goals. Specifically, what are they?
Sure. So like you said, there are 4 goals and they address all 3 legs of the sustainability stool: environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability, because you really need all 3 to be a successful operation and for our entire industry to be successful long term. So the first goal is to demonstrate the climate neutrality of U.S. cattle production by 2040. We think that we are well on our way to accomplishing that, and so kind of putting it on paper gives us something to work toward collectively. But we know that operations can't be environmentally sustainable unless they're profitable, right? Unless they're economically sustainable. So we're going to work to create and enhance opportunities that result in a quantifiable increase in producer profitability by 2025. Now, the third leg of the sustainability stool is social sustainability, and we know that cattle producers are excellent neighbors and really important employers in rural communities across the country. So we are going to work to enhance trust in cattle producers as responsible stewards of their animals and resources by expanding educational opportunities in animal care and handling programs to further improve animal well-being, while also continuously improving our industry's workforce safety and well-being.
So now that we've painted those targets, we've set those goals, what are the next steps?
Sure. So I think let's start with the climate neutrality goal. I think there are going to be 3 steps. It's going to be so important to make sure that the science is right, that we're using adequate measurements to make sure that emissions from agriculture and all industries are being accurately counted, that agricultural emissions aren't being outweighed compared to other industries, especially in the U.S. where we are so efficient and have made so many improvements over time. It's also going to be important to continue improving our technology. So when we're talking about feed additive use on feed yards or grazing management for our ranches, that's all going to be important in kind of furthering our improvements in the next 20 years. And then finally, making sure that producers are able to be compensated for the ecosystem services they provide. We know that cattle's only one part of a ranch, right? The beef that you sell is only one part of your contribution to society. The green space that you provide, the natural water filters that you provide, carbon sequestration, those are all really vital things that our industry is giving back to society. And then I think that kind of leads into our economic sustainability goal, making sure that producers have a variety of income streams, right? Maybe emphasizing the money that we can get from selling cattle, but also talking about how can we be compensated for the other services that we provide. And then when it comes to social sustainability, making sure that our producers have resources related to workforce safety, making sure that they have access to BQA programming. Those are all going to be the things that help us achieve all 4 goals.
So as I talk to beef cattle producers, there are real differences of opinion relative to this topic of sustainability and what it means for their operations long term. I'm curious, what do you want cattle producers to know about sustainability and the impact it could have on their cattle operations long term?
Sustainability isn't a bad word. I think that's the message that I would like to get across. When I think about sustainability, U.S. cattle production is the first thing that comes to mind. I think that the success over hundreds of years of our industry in this country is the very definition of sustainability. And we really just want to make sure that producers are able to keep doing what they've been doing for so long, right? Sustainability is about what we've done in the past, about the legacy that we've built, but then being able to continue that legacy and pass those operations on to the next generation.
And I love your focus on continuous improvement, because that's something we can all rally around,
Absolutely.
I believe, demonstrate a belief in as well. Thanks so much, Mary Thomas.
Thanks.
Now, if you want to learn more about the beef industry's sustainability goals, or just have questions about how sustainability is impacting the beef industry, be sure to visit the website ncba.org/sustainability. As you're no doubt aware, a lot happens on Capitol Hill as Congress works on a variety of different issues. We sent Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Kate Maher to the Hill to talk with those directly involved in the decision-making process.
Thanks, Kevin. It's an honor to welcome to the show for the first time Senator John Bozeman from the state of Arkansas. Senator, thanks for joining us. As the ranking member of the Senate Committee for Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, you guys have quite the workload. What are some of the topics that you do and work on in the committee that could impact cattle producers?
Well, I think the major thing that we're starting to talk about now is the new Farm Bill. And so there'll be all kinds of things in there. The most important thing, what we're starting to do now, is get input from the stakeholders. And traditionally, farm bills are not Republican and Democrat. They're region of the countries. South's a little different. They irrigate. Great Plains are different. The I's, Iowa, Indiana. California is very different. They've got unique, they export a lot. And then you've got the different commodities. And livestock is certainly very, very important. And one of our leading sectors, we got a bunch of it in Arkansas. I used to have a bunch of cows. I'm probably the only congressperson, I know I'm the only congressman or congressperson that has an AI certificate. So I understand a lot about this.
Not many of those on display here in Washington, D.C. for sure.
I need to hang it on the wall someplace around here so y'all can.
That would be fantastic. It's hard. You mentioned the Farm Bill. It's hard to believe, but here we are, 2023 Farm Bill coming up. Not only is there probably not many other people here in the district with an AI certificate, but not a lot of people that are involved in Farm Bill discussions don't have an agricultural background. Why is your committee so important in the process then to sort of bring some of that common sense and bring agriculture to the Farm Bill?
It's really important. It's not only important just in Congress in general. Sometimes it's actually very important for the committee, because you have to remember that the committee has about 20% of it has to do with agriculture. The other 80% is really food stamps, nutrition programs, things like that. So many of the people that are on the committee are on there for that reason, really don't care much about production agriculture. So we have to do a good job of educating Congress, and then also educate those members as to how important agriculture is.
It's very important and a complicated process. A congressman from Ohio once said, you have to grow it before you can give it away. So thanks for all your work on that. You mentioned exports a moment ago. Port backlogs and supply chain issues have caused, of course, like everybody else, the cattle industry some headaches. What's being done to find some solutions to those issues?
Well, I think one of the most important things, Dusty Johnson has a bill in the House, and then Senator Thune has a bill in the Senate. And so I actually got on the Senate bill. We hope to get that passed, get it into conference. What that does is give different entities more authority so that we can get rid of the backlog. That's always been a little bit of a problem on the West Coast. We're seeing it now on the East Coast also, New Orleans also. So it is huge. We've got a lot of agricultural products sitting around, and part of the reason is that they're really, the shippers are looking at things that are high value, and so they don't really care about the lower value stuff. Only it's so important. People have to eat, but we're trying to level the playing field and make a difference.
And that's fantastic to hear, because the U.S. beef production certainly plays a part in a food secure world for our global partners.
And with Ukraine, the situation that we have there, both with Russia and Ukraine, with those countries essentially, not producing what they normally produce, and they produce a lot of food, it makes it that much more important. So not only for us to supply the food that we need in our country, but as you say, to get it out to the rest of the world. We are the breadbasket, and nobody does a better job environmentally or from a safety factor or from a price point.
You mentioned being a sustainable food source, and of course, environmental regulations have a big impact on production agriculture here, especially for beef farmers and ranchers. The Biden administration is looking to change up the waters of the U.S. rule. How can we help? What can be done to make sure that WOTUS rule doesn't have huge impacts to agriculture and farmers and ranchers, and that we come out of it with some certainty, and that we don't have to worry about just permitting every little piece of water on our properties?
Well, if the past is any indication of the future, it's going to make a huge difference. I think 97%, some humongous amount was waters of the U.S. in Arkansas, and true throughout the country. This is all about the federal government trying to determine what you do with your property. And so it is huge. My message to agriculture right now is that we have to stick together. And we did such a good job of this. Stepped up basis was a good example of that. They were talking about when they were trying to pass Build Back Broke, and one of the major pay-fors was eliminating stepped-up basis, which would have devastated the family farm and small business. So the agriculture community stood firm, and as a result, we got it kicked out. This is what we've got to do with these crippling regulations. The other thing is it's clearly unconstitutional. So I think we'll have a good chance of getting it kicked out in the court. The thing that really just throws a wet blanket on the economy, though, is uncertainty. And when you've got these rules hanging out, it makes it difficult for you to plan what you're going to do, and as a result, it just kind of clamps everything down. Thank you for having me, and thanks for all that you do. Nobody's more respected than you all in the industry. And as I said earlier, we have to stick together. Organizations like yourself make such a big difference. And the fact that you're here in Washington, also, again, thank you. And we've got a lot of challenges going forward, but working together, I think we've got a lot of opportunities too.
Well, again, thank you. NCBA looks forward to working with you moving forward and protecting our nation's beef supply. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Kevin, we'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Kate. Now, when we come back, we'll discuss some of the issues facing ranchers who graze on federal lands. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Nasalgen 3 is a new 3-way intranasal BRD vaccine that offers young calves unrivaled protection against devastating respiratory diseases, including IBR, BRSV, and PI3. And it has a unique blue shadow, so there's no second guessing which animals have been vaccinated. To up your protection, choose new Nasalgen 3 PMH, the first and only 5-way intranasal vaccine on the market. Talk to your veterinarian and visit nasalgen.com to learn more.
For commercial cow-calf producers, crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer is the smart, reliable, and profitable choice. Gelbvieh and Balancer females offer maternal superiority through increased fertility, greater longevity, and more pounds of calf weaned per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer cattle deliver increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and excellent carcass merit. Balancer adds the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Gelbvieh and Balancer, the smart, reliable, and profitable choice. Find out more at the website gelbvieh.org.
Farmers and ranchers know firsthand that Congress isn't the only group in Washington that can have an impact on our business. From EPA to USDA, federal regulations can hit the beef industry hard, especially for those raising cattle on federal lands. And joining us now to share some insight on this important topic is Caitlin Glover, Executive Director of the Public Lands Council and NCBA Natural Resources, and Sigrid Johannes, Associate Director of the PLC and NCBA Natural Resources. Caitlin, for those who may be unfamiliar with the Public Lands Council, tell us a little bit about the organization and its goals.
Sure. So I'm very fortunate to have this dual role with the Public Lands Council and NCBA, because the Public Lands Council is the only organization in Washington dedicated solely to this question of representing the rights and interests of those who raise cattle and sheep on federal lands. It blends really nicely with my role here at NCBA, because NCBA is a member of one of the affiliates of the Public Lands Council, along with the American Sheep Industry Association, as well as the Association of National Grasslands. Together with our 3 national affiliates, we work with members across the West, across 14 states where federal grazing permits occur, working with 12 state associations to make sure that their permittees, those who are the primary caretakers of so many of those federal acres, know that they have people here in Washington fighting just for them.
So Sigrid, you've recently joined the PLC, and tell us just a little bit about your background and your role with the organization.
Sure thing. So I did just start with the Public Lands Council and the NCBA Natural Resources team. Prior to that, I was actually still with NCBA, but working on the communications team. So got a little bit of experience translating those issues to our audience, both inside and outside of agriculture. I actually grew up in Washington, D.C., which throws people for a loop sometimes, but it means that I have a big factor in common with 98% of Americans who didn't grow up in an agriculture background, and with a lot of the people who are making decisions that impact federal grazing permittees from both a legislative and regulatory standpoint.
Caitlin, let's talk about 2021. What were some of the key accomplishments of the past year?
Well, when you talk about accomplishments here in Washington, D.C., sometimes they're so fleeting. You know, whether you're talking about regulatory wins or legislative wins, those can change with the presidency. And that's really what we were working through most of last year. You know, the prior administration had made some huge strides in the Endangered Species Act, grazing regulations on BLM lands, and a number of other issues as well. So last year, we spent all of our time building relationships with the new administration, continuing to build that legislative foundation, that knowledge base in Congress, to make sure that we were well set up for this year. Last year was that relationship building phase, but we did see some victories in moving the discussion forward about the role of grazing. And it comes down to one line, that grazing is conservation. Whether you're in Wyoming, in California, or with our producers in Florida on the NCBA side, grazing is conservation. We saw huge success in that discussion point last year.
Couldn't agree with you more. Let's talk next year. What are some of the key goals and objectives on the agenda?
Well, we have quite a full agenda, not only for this year, but for next year as well. While the administration spent last year planning and reviewing things from the prior administration, now is where the rubber meets the road. In talking with all of our colleagues here in the Washington office, you know that the docket is full of regulations that are going to be changed or tweaked, in some cases rescinded. We also have a full legal docket as well on the Endangered Species Act and large predator side with wolves and a number of other issues. But we continue to move that conversation forward, that ball forward, using grazing as a role in fuels reduction, promoting grazing as an incredible tool to make landscapes more resilient, and really cementing the place for these producers on the landscape across the West, but then also across the country, where we really want to see these open, healthy green spaces for all Americans to enjoy. That's what this administration wants to see, and that's what our members give them.
Sigrid, question for you. Why is the work that you do in Public Lands Council important to the entire beef industry, not just those of us in the Western United States?
That's a great question, and I think it goes back to something that Caitlin said, that grazing is conservation and grazing is good. You have just over 24,000 federal grazing permittees between the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service, who in total provide just under $15 billion of ecosystem services per year. That's a massive proof point that we can take to decision makers in Washington on the good work that ranchers are doing to reduce fine fuel loads and reduce the risk of wildfire, to fight those invasive species, to make sure that landscapes are healthy and balanced. And I think the other side of that would be that the issues that public lands ranchers are dealing with are certainly unique, but they also have some reach that is very universal across the country. Whether you're dealing with vultures, panthers, gray wolves, predator species are a problem no matter where you go. And things like conservation and soil health and carbon sequestration, those are issues that we're hearing a lot about and are seeing a lot of focus on from this administration in every part of the country. So that work between the Public Lands Council and NCBA lets us speak with one larger and more unified voice.
Thanks for coming to the show. Hope you'll come back sometime, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our industry. Now, for more information on how PLC supports cattle producers who hold public lands grazing permits, be sure to visit the website publiclandscouncil.org. Still to come, we'll discuss the topic of conservation with the chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Stay with us. There's more of this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen when we return.
Grass is the center of our universe. We've got to have a grass program that we can count on and plan on. That's what we need to sustain us, to keep us growing, to keep us prospering.
Welcome back. Over the years, many farmers and ranchers have pointed to the Natural Resource Conservation Service as a key partner to help them achieve their sustainability goals. We're joined now by Terry Cosby. He's chief of the NRCS. Chief Cosby, tell us just a little bit about your background.
Well, Kevin, I was born in the state of Mississippi on a cotton farm. My folks were cotton farmers, and we raised cows and hogs and pigs, a lot of things that a lot of the folks did at that time. I went to college at the early age of 16 at Alcorn State University down in southern Mississippi, and started my career with NRCS back in 1979. So almost 43 years of service. Worked all over the country, and now the previous job was the state conservationist for the state of Ohio. Okay. And on May 24th, I was sworn in as the 17th chief.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir.
As you know, cattle producers already invest very heavily in conservation efforts. Tell us about some of the ways NRCS helps producers to do just that.
Our history over the last 90 years, almost 90 years, has been to help farmers. And we go out and we write conservation plans. Yes. So we write a prescription for the land, whether it's row crop, whether it's pasture. And here we're talking about cattlemen. And I tell you what, we have a great relationship out there across the country. NRCS is one of those trusted partners with producers. And so we offer technical assistance through our planning, and then we also offer financial assistance to help defray some of the cost of some of the programs that people might want to put on their farm.
And you've been a great help to me in my operation, so I very much appreciate the work of our local NRCS experts in helping me do just that. You all have also been an incredible supporter and longtime supporter of the Environmental Stewardship Award program. Why is that so important to you all?
It's one of those prestigious awards that we just love. And when I became chief, the staff talked about that as a top tier award, and we love that. But it also gives us an opportunity to recognize farmers out there, especially grazers or folks that have livestock, especially cattle, that just recognize them for the great work they do every day on the farm. Also, those folks are spokesmen for it, for other folks, and they also have people come and look at their operations to see what they're doing, and so they're just great to work with.
They do serve as incredible and inspirational examples for us all. Yes. President Biden's goal of conserving 30% of this nation's land and water by 2030 is an important one that lots of folks are focused on. And clearly in the beef cattle industry, we believe we're already doing a lot in that effort. What do you anticipate doing in order to make certain that the efforts that ranchers are already doing are recognized in this 30 by 30 plan?
One of the things we're doing is we're having a lot of conversations. We're inviting a lot of stakeholders to the table just to discuss this. The Biden-Harris administration laid out the vision for this, and we have a lot of experts that's working on it, and I think it's going to be great. One of the things I want to stress, though, is that this is locally led, science-based, and folks out there will have a voice in this. I know that there are some concerns.
Yes.
But I think we can say that the concerns shouldn't be there because we're going to be listening to the local landowners and working with them to talk about this. And we're still working on that definition. So we're asking a lot of folks to come to the table with us to talk about this. And also, when we set on the definition, we'll have a lot of input.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's reassuring for sure. One last question for folks watching at home who may want to make some improvements in their own operations, but are not quite sure how to get started. What advice do you provide for them?
Well, we have 2,500 offices across the country and about 11,000 employees. And so we're back at the office. COVID was pretty hard on us.
Yes.
We had, there's a lot of things we did, but we're back in the office now, and we're hoping that producers will come see us. Good. And we still have the option of doing it virtually or by phone. But, we have several websites. One of the things that we've done this year is we've put all of our sign-up dates on a website in one location, USDA.gov, for folks to go look at. And it has every state, every sign-up. And the thing to remember is we're a year-round sign-up. So it's not come in today, but you can come in 365 days and sign up for our programs. And we want producers to do that because our staff is they're not sitting there, but they're waiting on folks to call and ask for assistance.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all you do. You are an incredibly important resource to all of us in rural America, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
As Chief Cosby said, it's easy to get started on conservation planning. Just call your local NRCS office, or you can visit the website nrcs.usda.gov to learn all about the technical and financial assistance the NRCS can provide. We all know decisions that are made here in Washington, D.C. can have a direct impact on your cattle operation. And joining me now to talk about some of the top issues of the moment for cattlemen and women is U.S. Representative G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. Congressman, thank you for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Pleasure and honor to be with you.
Let's talk about the Farm Bill. You are a ranking member of the House Agricultural Committee, and obviously discussions are already beginning on the 2023 Farm Bill. What can you tell us about some of the provisions that may be interesting to our beef cattle producers?
Yeah, well, we're finally getting started, but it feels like we're almost 2 years behind. It's really important to do oversight on the 2018 Farm Bill. We had some pretty good provisions that we put into that Farm Bill. But at the same time, we've had 3 hearings so far. Preparing for the 2018 Farm Bill, we had over 130. Wow. And so it's quite a difference. Now, hopefully we'll pick up a little speed here. I have a sense of urgency as we prepare for a Farm Bill that expires, September 30th, 2023, next year. And so we need to look at all the titles. And as it comes to obviously the livestock industry and cattle, we have issues related to risk management, and the livestock portion has been a significant portion of that now. Yeah. It was down around 500 million previously, and now it's measured in the billions. And so looking at, and we need to hear from the cattlemen and cattlewomen that are out there of what's working, what's not working. That's how we prepare for the Farm Bill. I've been, in addition to doing the hearings here, I know I've been taking my opportunities to travel around the country, meet with, get out to feedlots in different places, processing plants, and all the everything in the livestock industry to be able to find out firsthand, what the current status is. Conservation programs are a part of that, but risk management, disaster relief, because the issues that we have, there's no industry more subject to weather than agriculture. And, we had a lot of cattlemen that were struggling to find feed with drought conditions.
And that drought continues, as you're well aware. So the timeliness of this couldn't be more important. Let's talk about climate provisions. We hear a lot about inclusion of various climate provisions in the Farm Bill, and I'm curious, what's your take on the role of voluntary conservation programs and ensuring that producers have the option of participating or not participating in those voluntary programs?
Right. Well, voluntary-led conservation has been a godsend. It has done so much. And the conservation titles that help with that. I think with what we do in the Farm Bill under the conservation title has been, really has led our American farmers and ranchers and foresters to be not climate criminals, but climate heroes.
Amen.
And that's a story we got to tell. We have to do a better job of putting the word out on that. This push to make climate the topic of a Farm Bill and create a Farm Bill title is just inappropriate, because today, around the world, there's no better champion, no better hero for a healthier environment and a healthier economy than the American farmer, rancher, and forester. Those livestock are stimulating that soil, and quite frankly, it's causing better root growth, and it's helping to sequester greenhouse gases. And when you take it all together as agriculture, we're actually sequestering, on the average, they say 6.1 gigatons a year of greenhouse gases. And the best part of that is we manufacture that into topsoil.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, how big is a gigaton? Well, I'm not quite sure, but if you put it in perspective, at the end of the day, the research shows that we sequester 10.1% more than what we emit on those agriculture lands. There's no greater force for good for a healthier environment and battling climate change if you're worried about greenhouse gases. And, our American cattlemen have a lot to do with that.
Can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear a leader like you be so informed on that topic. Let's talk technology for a minute. You had a big role in securing the rural broadband access, and critically important to so many rural communities all across the country. Tell us more.
No, it really is for ranching. For all kinds of farming. I was very proud of the work that the House Agriculture Committee did. Now, we started as House Republicans. With my leadership, we introduced a broadband bill that was significant. It would have, it really would have filled the digital divide. It would have made sure that we had sufficient broadband with sufficient wavelength to meet our needs, which is good for rural communities, but quite frankly, it's good for those ranchers and farmers. And what we did with that, though, we did it in a true Agriculture Committee way. Reached out to Chairman Scott, and we got together and we improved upon the bill. Wow. We put forth significant money, somewhere around $36 billion, which would go a long ways of bridging digital divide. We put an innovation component to it, so they got that help maybe get that last 2% of the really hard to reach places.
Yes.
We actually created a circuit rider program for broadband, so that we had a resource for local communities to be able to figure out where the resources are and determine what their needs are. And at the end of the day, we passed it unanimously out of the House, out of the committee. 100%. Every Democrat, every Republican was proud to work hand in hand with Chairman Scott on that. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to get Mrs. Pelosi to put it on the floor for a vote, and which is sad, because this is a bill, because we know that American agriculture, including ranching, is science, technology, and innovation. And we have to have that, we have to bridge that digital divide, right? With all the things we can do to get us efficiency, just accessing markets around the world from your ranch. That's the beauty of today's technology.
Absolutely critical, and it's so, again, reassuring to see some of that bipartisan efforts actually work at times here on Capitol Hill.
More times than not in the Agriculture Committee.
Let's talk about a controversial topic, which is cattle markets. It's been a sensitive one for some time. What are the things that Congress and the Agriculture Committee is doing in order to return more leverage back to the cattle producers?
Well, obviously we're working with the producers. That's important. We need the cattle producers' voice at the table, and that's part of what I call my Rural America barnstorming tour. That's part of that, bringing their voices back, and having those conversations and finding out what. I've always believed that there's no one knows the best solutions probably than the people that are dealing with the problems every day. And that's why bringing the voices of the producers, the cattle producers to the table are so important. And so we're obviously, trying to do that as we look forward. We've done some things. Another bill that was completely unanimous, but it was kind of came out of the industry was the cattle market contract.
Yes.
Legislation. Dusty Johnson,
yes.
South Dakota, did a great job of leading that for us, and we were able, that passed unanimously out of the House Agriculture Committee, and so real proud of those efforts. Part of what we're doing is trying to promote on the processing side.
Yes.
We just the limitations, of 4 large processors, that just doesn't work, right? And so we need greater competition. Competition is a good thing. And so one of the things that we've looked at is and we're trying to, I'm trying to look at, and I know Chairman Scott's interested in, is not just for processors, but producers. What conditions can we create to help small grow to medium grow to large? And so that we really insulate ourselves within the cattle market, both on the processing side and certainly on the production side. And that's a model we're trying to use across all of agriculture right now.
Tough issues, but so reassuring to have folks like you who are really serious about understanding the needs of cattle producers all over the country. Thanks for coming to the show.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
There's more Cattlemen to Cattlemen still ahead, so stay with us.
Take advantage of the very best in Hereford genetics with the Sandhill Farms annual production sale, Saturday, March 26th.
We've really tried to put a lot of carcass traits in our cattle. Ultimately, that's going to be a driver in price and profit.
I buy bulls from Sandhills because in the end, there's more money in my pocket selling the end product.
The Schultz family focuses on continuous genetic improvement of their Hereford cattle year after year.
I view everybody that sits in the seats at our sale as our boss. We want our genetics to get better every year. We've got to make the next set of bulls that the customer comes to purchase genetically better than the ones before.
Sandhill Farms, the brand that exceeds your goals. Find out more at the website sandhillfarms.com. You have an upcoming production sale to advertise? Then contact the Cattlemen to Cattlemen marketing team or your breed association to learn more.
Well, that wraps up this special Ag Day edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We'll see you again next week, right here on RFD TV.